In the late 1950s, American Bandstand wasn't just a television show. It was a national ritual. Every weekday afternoon, millions of teenagers rushed home, turned on their sets, and watched kids just like themselves become stars through the simple act of dancing. What they saw was magic. Ordinary high school students transformed into cultural icons, their names whispered in fan clubs, and their faces splashed across teen magazines. The real fascination came from the couples. Two dancers moving in harmony could project a story of friendship, romance, or youthful freedom, often without speaking a word. Viewers fell in love not only with the music, but with the pairs whose chemistry seemed effortless and whose steps became the blueprint for a generation. These partnerships shaped fashion, influenced dance crazes, and etched themselves into memory as symbols of 1950s and 1960s youth culture. Among the many who took to the floor, 5 couples stood above the rest, duos whose grace, charm, and connection turned them into legends of the bandstand era. Number 5 belongs to Bunny Gibson and Eddie Kelly, a duo whose partnership began not with planning, but with a stroke of chance. Bunny was just 13 when she first entered the American Bandstand studio, full of energy and curiosity. Eddie was already a familiar presence, known for his tall frame and smooth steps. One afternoon, when Eddie's regular partner Marianne Cuff couldn't make it, he turned to Bunny. Their heights matched, their rhythm clicked, and from that moment on, a new pair had taken shape. What set Bunny and Eddie apart was not polish or glamour, but joy. They brought spontaneity to the floor. Wide smiles, laughter, and a kind of unstudied rhythm that made their dancing feel authentic. While other couples looked like rehearsed performers, Bunny and Eddie gave the impression that they were simply having fun, and the audience loved them for it. They made the twist feel natural. They turned simple spins into spectacles, and they reminded teenagers watching at home that dance was less about perfection and more about expression. Fans responded immediately. Letters poured into the studio, naming them among the most popular regulars. Teen magazines featured their photos, and fan clubs sprang up across the country. Their appeal rested in how accessible they seemed, 2 ordinary kids who, by sheer chemistry, created magic on television. Parents approved of their clean-cut charm, while teenagers saw them as models of confidence and freedom. Their prominence grew as the show introduced new dances and musical styles. When Chubby Checker debuted The Twist, it was Bunny and Eddie who showed America how to move. Their playful energy helped launch a nationwide craze, and soon their steps were being imitated in school gyms and living rooms everywhere. The bandstand studio audience cheered for them, but the greater applause came from the unseen millions following along at home. Off camera, their friendship was easygoing. They were not sweethearts, despite the rumors, but they understood each other in the unspoken language of rhythm. That trust made them one of the most reliable and entertaining duos on the floor. When the spotlight shifted to others, they remained consistent, always ready to step into the music, always ready to remind everyone why dancing was the heartbeat of the show. In later years, both carried their bandstand experience into different paths. Eddie moved to California, where he taught dance and shared his memories with a new generation, becoming a kind of ambassador for the bandstand spirit. Bunny pursued acting and public speaking, staying connected to the nostalgia of the era and appearing in documentaries that celebrated the show's legacy. Both often spoke of that first unexpected dance as the turning point that shaped their lives. Bunny Gibson and Eddie Kelly may not have been crowned as bandstand's ultimate sweethearts, but their gift was something else: the ability to spread happiness through movement. They embodied the idea that sometimes fate pairs the right 2 people at the right time, and the result is unforgettable. As we move forward, number 4 brings us to a partnership remembered not for spontaneity, but for elegance and poise: Carole Scaldeferri and Frank Levins. Number 4 goes to Carole Scaldeferri and Frank Levins, a duo remembered for their poise and polish. Where Bunny and Eddie brought spontaneity, Carole and Frank embodied refinement. They looked as if they had stepped out of a ballroom onto the bandstand floor, and their graceful presence gave the show a touch of elegance that balanced the raw energy of rock and roll. Carole joined American Bandstand in 1957 and quickly caught the eye of viewers across the country. She was stylish and self-assured, always mindful of her appearance. In fact, the audience was so invested in her image that even small details became national talking points. One day she changed dresses during the broadcast, and the studio was flooded with letters asking why. On another, she skipped her usual lipstick, and the response was just as intense. These reactions revealed something important. The bandstand dancers were not simply background figures. They were trendsetters, and their choices carried real weight with teenage America. Frank Levins entered around the same time and became Carole's natural counterpart. Handsome, confident, and steady on his feet, he provided the perfect balance to her grace. Together they danced foxtrots, cha-chas, and smooth rock numbers that highlighted precision rather than showmanship. Their movements seemed effortless, yet carefully measured, as though they were aware that millions of eyes were watching. Parents approved of them. In an era when some adults were uneasy about rock music and teenage culture, Carole and Frank reassured viewers that dancing could be respectable as well as exciting. They smiled, held themselves with dignity, and projected a wholesome image that made them favorites in living rooms from coast to coast. They proved that bandstand could be both fun and refined, appealing to multiple generations at once. What makes their story particularly moving is how ordinary their off-screen lives remained. Carole was just a Philadelphia teenager who suddenly found herself navigating a level of attention she could never have imagined. Frank, too, was simply enjoying the chance to dance on television, never expecting to be remembered decades later. Their partnership was not built on romance, but on trust and rhythm. Two young people who happened to complement each other perfectly in front of the cameras. In later years, life carried them away from the spotlight. Carole eventually left the show in 1961, living a full life before passing away in 2013. Frank followed a quieter path in Philadelphia until his death in 2019. Yet in kinescope stills and archival footage, they remain suspended in time. Two teenagers whose elegance brought a sense of grace to a youth movement often described as wild and rebellious. Carole Scaldeferri and Frank Levins may not have sparked the same fan frenzy as others, but their legacy lies in balance, proving that sophistication and rock and roll could share the same floor. Next, at number 3, we meet a duo whose spark and warmth made audiences believe in friendship as much as romance. Frani Giordano and Joe Fusco. At number 3 are Frani Giordano and Joe Fusco, a pair who brought warmth and charisma to the American Bandstand floor. Where Carole and Frank dazzled with elegance, Frannie and Joe captured hearts with a brightness that seemed to come from within. Together, they offered viewers a picture of harmony, not rehearsed perfection, but genuine connection, the kind that made audiences smile along with them. Frannie was radiant. With her expressive eyes and easy smile, she had the kind of presence that lit up a black-and-white television screen. She carried herself with confidence, but never lost the natural charm of a neighborhood girl from Philadelphia. Joe, on the other hand, offered strength and steadiness. A talented hairdresser off camera, he was known among friends for his sense of humor and loyalty. On the dance floor, he matched Frannie's grace with quiet assurance, creating a balance that felt authentic and deeply appealing. Audiences embraced them as if they were watching a young couple in love, even though their bond was rooted in friendship. Their partnership showed that dance could tell stories beyond romance, stories of trust, of mutual respect, and of the joy of simply moving together to music. Fan letters testified to their popularity, but it was their chemistry that truly secured their place in bandstand history. What made Joe especially memorable was his generosity behind the scenes. He often hosted Tuesday night dinners for fellow regulars, turning his home into a gathering place where the bandstand community could relax, laugh, and share their lives beyond the cameras. These dinners became legendary, a reminder that the show was built not just on television appearances, but on genuine friendships that sustained the dancers through both public scrutiny and private struggles. Frannie's story, too, extended beyond the studio. Coming from a large family, she often spent summers at her family's place in Sea Isle City, where music and companionship followed naturally. Her warmth wasn't an act for television. It was part of who she was. Even decades after leaving the show, nostalgia groups, online tributes, and reunion gatherings celebrated her, proof of how lasting her impact had been. Joe's life after Bandstand was more understated, but no less meaningful. He continued his career as a hairdresser, eventually becoming a respected figure in his community. When he passed away in 2009 at the age of 68, tributes from fellow dancers and fans alike remembered not only his skill on the floor, but also his kindness and generosity. Frani Giordano and Joe Fusco may never have had the national mythology of Bob and Justine or the dramatic aura of Kenny and Arlene, but they carved out their own unique space in bandstand history. They embodied friendship as performance, showing that the beauty of dance lies not only in perfect steps, but in the warmth of two people moving in sync. Our countdown now brings us to number 2, where the story becomes both iconic and complicated: the unforgettable partnership of Kenny Rossi and Arlene Sullivan. At number 2, we find Kenny Rossi and Arlene Sullivan, perhaps the most magnetic pair ever to step onto the American Bandstand floor. Together, they projected a chemistry so convincing that an entire nation believed they were destined for each other. To millions of teenagers tuning in after school, they looked like the perfect couple, graceful, confident, and impossibly in sync. Arlene was among the show's brightest stars. With her classic features and calm presence, she seemed to embody poise. She always knew how to play to the camera, not with exaggeration, but with subtle gestures that drew attention without forcing it. Kenny, meanwhile, carried a darker, more enigmatic charm. His smooth footwork and confident posture gave the impression of a young man completely at ease in the spotlight. When the music began, their movements fused into something larger than either of them. The illusion of young love broadcast across America. The illusion was powerful. Arlene and Kenny regularly received hundreds of fan letters each week, some reports placing the number as high as 500. Teen magazines featured their photographs, labeling them sweethearts of the dance floor. Parents approved of their clean, graceful style, while young viewers idolized them as the embodiment of teenage romance. Yet behind the camera, their story was different. Arlene and Kenny were never romantically involved. They were close partners, bound by trust and rhythm, but their relationship remained platonic. Decades later, Arlene shared the truth that could never have been spoken in the 1950s. She was a lesbian, and the romance America believed in was a creation of the screen, not her life. At a time when such honesty was impossible, she allowed the fantasy to play out, dancing with Kenny and keeping alive a dream that mattered deeply to viewers. This paradox makes their legacy even more compelling. They were symbols of a generation's innocence, yet their story also reflects the pressures of a society unwilling to accept difference. For Kenny, the spotlight faded quietly. He left little trace in the public eye and passed away in 2024, closing his chapter with the same mystery that once surrounded him. Arlene, on the other hand, continued to share her experiences, co-authoring Bandstand Diaries and attending reunions where fans celebrated her as a living connection to an era that defined their youth. The enduring fascination with Kenny Rossi and Arlene Sullivan lies in the tension between image and reality. On television, they were the perfect couple, adored and immortalized. In truth, they were two young people performing a role, navigating the expectations of an audience that wanted fairy tales more than facts. Their story reminds us that Bandstand was never just about dancing. It was about the way television could shape and even invent cultural ideals. And as memorable as their partnership was, one pair still stood above them all. At number 1, we arrive at Bob Clayton and Justine Carrelli, the ultimate sweethearts of American Bandstand. At the very top of our list at number 1 are Bob Clayton and Justine Carrelli, the duo most often remembered as the golden couple of American Bandstand. If Kenny and Arlene embodied illusion, Bob and Justine embodied fulfillment. They were everything the audience imagined a teenage romance should look like, graceful and glamorous, yet real enough to feel attainable. Justine joined the show in 1956, quickly becoming one of its most admired regulars. With her dark hair, stylish clothes, and dignified presence, she seemed to carry an aura beyond her years. Bob, handsome and poised, complemented her perfectly. When the program expanded to national television in 1957, they seized the moment by winning the Jitterbug contest during a live broadcast, a performance that electrified the audience and cemented their reputation. From then on, they weren't just dancers. They were symbols of young love. Fan magazines celebrated them as America's sweethearts. Letters addressed to Bob and Justin arrived by the hundreds, and viewers tuned in not only to hear the latest records, but to see their favorite couple glide across the floor. Their movements blended precision with affection. Every spin, every smile suggested a story unfolding between them. They embodied the dream of the 1950s teen: romance, harmony, and a sense that the future was wide open. Their popularity transcended the show itself. Photographs of the pair were featured in teen publications across the country, and fan clubs dedicated themselves to following their every appearance. Parents approved of their wholesome image, while young viewers imagined themselves in their shoes. At a time when television was still shaping national culture, Bob and Justin became more than personalities. They were archetypes. Life, however, followed its own course. Justine left Bandstand in the early 1960s, eventually marrying singer Paul Dino Bertuccini and later building a successful career in real estate in Arizona. Bob moved into business, running a boutique gift shop in Delaware. They pursued separate paths, but their connection to Bandstand remained. Reunion events brought them back together, and when they danced again, fans marveled at how easily they slipped into their old rhythm, as though no time had passed. When Justine passed away in 2023, tributes poured in from fans and fellow dancers who remembered her not only for her beauty and poise, but for the memories she helped create. Bob, too, is still remembered as the perfect partner who completed her image on the dance floor. Together, they stand as the definitive symbols of the show's golden age. Bob Clayton and Justine Carrelli's story is not simply about dance. It is about the way television captured a generation's hopes, how two teenagers could embody an entire culture's ideals, and how memory keeps them alive long after the music fades. They were, and remain, the ultimate sweethearts of American Bandstand. But their story also leads us to a larger question. Why do these couples, decades later, still matter so deeply in our cultural imagination? That is the heart of our final reflection. The stories of American Bandstand's most beloved couples reveal more than youthful dance routines. They capture how television shaped American culture during a period of immense social change. In living rooms across the country, teenagers didn't just watch music. They watched themselves reflected back, refracted through the faces and movements of ordinary kids, elevated to icons. Each partnership represented something larger than the sum of two dancers. Bunny Gibson and Eddie Kelly embodied spontaneity, a reminder that destiny could turn on a missed rehearsal and a single invitation to dance. Carole Scaldeferri and Frank Levins showed that elegance and composure could coexist with rock and roll, winning the approval of parents uneasy about teenage rebellion. Frani Giordano and Joe Fusco radiated warmth and friendship, offering a model of loyalty and camaraderie in a culture that often demanded romance. Rossi Arlene Sullivan reminded us of television's power to create illusions so persuasive that viewers believed in a love story that never existed. And at the top, Bob Clayton and Justine Carrelli gave audiences exactly what they longed for: the dream of perfect young sweethearts. The impact of these images rippled outward. Teenagers styled their hair to match their favorite dancers, copied their outfits, and practiced their steps in basements and school gyms. The dances they demonstrated, from the jitterbug to the twist, became national phenomena. More than simply entertaining, they were instructing a generation on how to move, dress, and even imagine love. For many, those images never faded. When bandstand dancers reunited decades later, audiences flocked to see them, eager to reconnect with a part of their own past. The smiles may have been older, the steps less agile, but the feeling was the same. Books like Bandstand Diaries and countless online groups keep the stories alive, proving that nostalgia is not only about memory, but about identity, a way of reaffirming who we were and who we still want to be. The legacy also lies in what these couples represent about television itself. They remind us that media is never neutral. It crafts ideals, tells stories, and sometimes conceals truths. Viewers in the 1950s wanted romance and wholesomeness, and the camera delivered it, even when the reality behind the scenes was different. Yet far from diminishing their significance, that contrast makes their stories richer. They reflect both the dreams we held and the compromises the times demanded. Today, when old footage resurfaces online, young viewers still comment on the style, the energy, and the innocence captured in black and white frames. The bandstand couples remain timeless because they embody universal longings for connection, for recognition, for the feeling of belonging to a rhythm larger than ourselves. Their steps may be frozen in kinescope reels, but their impact continues to move. And so, we arrive at our closing reflection. Why do these names, these faces, still linger in our collective imagination long after the music has stopped? More than 60 years have passed since the heyday of American Bandstand, yet the memory of its dancers still pulses with life. The couples who once spun across that modest Philadelphia studio have become part of America's cultural DNA. They remind us that television can elevate the everyday, that youth itself can become a symbol powerful enough to outlast the decades. Bob and Justin, Kenny and Arlene, Frannie and Joe, Carole and Frank, Bunny and Eddie, their names form a rhythm that still resonates, like lyrics to a song we never truly forget. Each partnership was unique, yet together they embodied the optimism of a generation stepping into an uncertain future with music as its guide. The dances are over, the studio long gone, but their images endure in faded photographs, grainy kinescopes, and, most importantly, in the memories of those who watched them live. They are more than nostalgia. They are proof that joy, friendship, and youthful energy can become history's most enduring treasures. So the question remains, which couple lives strongest in your memory? And if a bandstand were created today, who would capture that same magic for a new generation?